Welcome to this Mastery Empowerment course from New Earth One Network. This is designed exclusively for your higher self connection and embodiment. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. In this episode, we have Carly Vernon, who really is about embodiment, true embodiment. And she has a very interesting modality, biotensegrity, that we're going to talk about today, because truly this is embodying your higher consciousness with the matrix of elemental fascial biotensegrity. Welcome, Carly. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Loren. I'm so thrilled. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
The work that you bring forward in the world is leading edge, and we honor you for bringing it forward. As we go into experience this, let's talk about really what is biotensegrity.
Well, we'll break it down even more with the root word, which is tensegrity. And this was a phrase coined by Buckminster Fuller, who you may or may not recognize. He is also the author of some fabulous quotes, one of which is my favorite, that says, "There's nothing in a caterpillar that tells you it will be a butterfly." He is the inventor of the geodesic dome, which I know we've all seen them. The Epcot Center is a geodesic dome. And if you look at a dome like that, and you can see all of the constructs of it, and that's held together through what he coined as tensegrity, which is integrity in the tension. And so the body we're biotensegrital, which means it's not just our bones and our muscles like a tent that's holding us together, but the integral parts within our organs are part of that tensegrital system. So they pull and push along with the structural components of the bones, the ligaments, and the skin. So if you can imagine a geodesic dome, and then give it a floor, and then imagine all of the components inside of that dome, anything that moves is going to affect the structure if it's moving, and any compromise will affect the entire structure as well.
So as you work with this structure within ourself, and we're talking embodiment, what's going on here, and how does that structure get distorted? That's the whole topic of our conversation.
That is exactly. Well, it's a huge rabbit hole, and it's fun to pick a different one to jump in depending upon how we're starting the conversation. But let's begin with the elementals. So the way the elementals work with our body, they have different entry points. So the earth element comes in through sort of a sphere between the feet, and that represents our physical body. And then we have in the pelvis, we have our emotional body, and that's the water element. And then we have the fire element, which is the mental body, and that's in the rib cage, in the center of the rib cage. And then the air element is up at the base of the skull, the top of the throat. And when we think about each of those elements. So the physical body, the earth element, I mean, we can see us, that's us. We're a physical presentation of the earth element. And then we think about the emotional body is water, and we can see that as not just the water that we drink and the water components of our system, the water in the blood cells, the water in our urine, but it also is, we can talk about this later, it's part of the cerebrospinal fluid is 99% water. So there's the water element, and that's our emotion. So our emotion is energy in motion. It's water moving through our body or not. And then I'm going to skip over the fire for a minute and go to the air element, and that's our intuitive body, our memory, or our ability to access memory or not, depending upon whether we have access, whether it's been cut off or compromised. So we can sort of understand how each of those components manifest in the body. When it comes to the fire element, it is an electrical component, so that's our neurological system. And the way I see the fire element in the body, and the way it was shown to me, is that it invests in the tissue. So I see it I see it much like if you had a linen tablecloth and your candle dripped over, and then the wax invested in the tissue, and you're just never gonna get it out. So the mental body invests in our physical body like the wax in the linen tablecloth. So then if we bring that to that visualization of the biotensegrital structure, we've got these layers, abundant layers of fascia, which is the connective tissue that holds our biotensegrital structure together, which drips cerebrospinal fluid. So if the water is flowing, if the emotion is flowing. But if our mental construct is of a lower frequency, if it's a lower carbon burning fire, then it's going to create soot and ash, and it's going to get stuck in the tissue. So that's our thinking mind. And so that brings us to the air element, right? So our intuition is air flowing through. It's our memory coming through. And if we've got, and so the way that the heart-brain coherence works, which I'm sure you're aware of, I'm sure you've had many, many people on talking about the heart-brain coherence. But if we think about the tissue, that avenue that takes, there are more afferent nerve fibers from the heart to the brain, which means the brain's listening to the heart way more than the other way around. So our instruction comes from our heart to our brain. But if we've got restrictions between the heart and the air element, the brain, so for example, a twisted tongue, which we'll get into later when we talk about enslavement devices. So if we've compromised the pathway from the heart to the brain, then what happens is we run on the thinking mind, the feeling mind, our heart can't get the message up to the brain to disseminate the information.
Okay, that really explains how our thoughts become part of our physical vessel, part of every cell. And so when we talk about clearing, we are literally clearing this out of the physical body.
Yes. Yes, we are clearing it out of the physical body and recognizing that there are what I call qualifying and disqualifying vernacular, the way we choose to speak. And as you know, whenever you say I am, whatever comes next, you're basically calling source that because we are source. So if we say things like I'm stupid or, whatever we would say after that, I try not to even give examples because I don't like that that frequency, that vibration in there. When we say that, all of our cells in the body line up and invest that into the tissue. And so then we distort. So when we introduce qualifying language, we begin to, we clear that out, but we have to be very conscious of what we are thinking and saying on a regular basis. Be very present, not just what we're saying to ourselves, which is big, but even what we're saying, is a good example that I had the other day with a friend about being in our car, because I live in Massachusetts and we all know what Massachusetts is known for in terms of drivers. Maybe you don't, but it's not a friendly place to be in a car. And so there's a lot of road rage. So when we get in the car and we're spewing these things out, we're not only projecting those words onto somebody else, it's boomeranging back into us, right? And we can feel that if you really pay attention, things in your body begin to squeeze. And we'll get into that later.
Even the water elemental, as we know from Masaru Emoto's work, right? So not only is it just the mental coming in the body, but we're doing it through all of those elements. Wow.
Yeah, polluting the water too. The water crystals just distort. And remembering the cerebrospinal fluid, which is the fluid that bathes the brain. It's a shock absorber for the brain. And that cerebrospinal fluid travels down the brain stem through the spinal cord. And then it drips like a slow drip, saturating hose. I can't think of what it's called right now. That drips out into the fascia and delivers the water out all throughout our whole body. So if we're polluting our water, so we're talking about emotional body, because your emotions feed your thoughts. So now we've got all of this polluted water dripping through our brain, down our spinal column, out into the greatest extension of our body. So we have to flush it, we have to clean it, not only through movement, like yoga and qigong and those sorts of things, but through literally changing how we speak.
This is really the work that you do. Oftentimes I call it inner yoga in a way, because of what it is that you're doing. We're going to experience a little bit about that. But for those who are new to your work, it's quite fascinating. Can you share a little bit about what, given all this information now, what you know about how these elementals and our thinking affect the body, or how our thinking affects the body? What are we to do with this? What does your work do to overcome all of this or correct the path?
Let's see, how do I get into this? Because I see things multidimensionally, and it's challenging sometimes to explain that. And the easiest way for me to say it is I see inside the body what happens when we have these thoughts. And that has led me down a path to see, a lot of those thought patterns. It's patterning that we've gotten from our childhood, but also from previous lifetimes, as well as it's written on the DNA. And, this is all being revealed now, that these patterns, these thought patterns, are encoded on our DNA. And that encodement, those little DNA twisters, they come through the umbilical cord. So we can think about our mind control patterning is coming through our umbilical cord. And when you look at the umbilical cord, once it's cut, it manifests, it transmutes into a ligamentous biotensegrital supportive structure, kind of like flexible tent poles. And that ligament, it disperses, and it has, tertiaries all through the body, kind of like if you picture an umbrella and how the umbrella kind of goes out like that. So let's say, for example, so we go into the navel. So I dive in and I can see the navel, and we twist the navel up, right? You've either got an innie or an outie, but if you look, it's all twisted up. And if you think about a balloon, and if you've twisted the mouth part of the balloon and tied it in a knot, and if you try to untie that, you gotta like really, you have to really get in there and unstick those twisted parts that are kind of stuck together. Well, those twisted parts travel through our body. And those parts are the manifested pull string for breath. So, when we're in a fetal position and they pull the baby out, they hold the baby upside down. What that does is that literally creates an internal negative pressure, and it causes that pull, if the baby's upside down, that causes that ligament to pull on the diaphragm and create the first inhale. That ligament doesn't just go to the diaphragm. If we're talking about going north, it invests, and absolutely everything is connected. So when I'm speaking, I am speaking about one thing at a time, but it's all literally connected. It's a matrix. So that ligament continues, it courses through the liver, and then comes up and meets it courses through the liver and attaches to the spleen and the kidneys and the adrenals, comes up through the diaphragm, wraps around the heart, comes up the throat. And then when it comes up through the throat, manifests in through the palate, goes up to the skull. And then once it's up in the skull, it creates a tent across the middle in a horizontal fashion called the tentorium cerebelli. And then in a vertical called the falx cerebri. So, and that's just going north. We're not going to go south yet. We can go south a little bit later because I don't want to overload you.
Let me just ask a quick question. You said that these thought patterns come in through the umbilical cord. Is it our ancestral thought patterns and past life thought patterns? All of it?
All of it, and present life. So those patterns are on the DNA. And when we need to breathe, or when we interfere with our breath through enslavement devices, which we'll talk about a little bit later, that pattern, that line that I just relayed to you, is compromised, because that's the pull cord for our breathing. So our mental thoughts, so you can play this game. You can think about, if you're out for a walk, or you're sitting at your desk and your back starts hurting, or you can't breathe, play with the dial of your navel, because that invests all the way back into the lumbar spine, or actually into the whole spine, but it invests into where the rib cage meets the lumbar spine, the thoracic spine. So if your back is bothering you, tweak your belly button.
Okay, that's really interesting. And again, this is where, when in our experience with you, we're going to have examples of, like, with the tongue and all of these parts in the body. But what do you do when you dial back or play with the dial of the navel?
What do I do with it when I guide people? Well, first I invite you to thinking about that tensegrity. I invite you to lift the tongue up, because that's that pull string. So you would lift the tongue up and spread it across the palate to match this tentorium and to match your diaphragm. So the tongue comes up and anchors out into the palate. And then as you breathe in, you would feel this, you would pull the navel, the belly button, down while you lift the tongue up, and you'll feel a lengthening and expansion along that whole line. And that in and of itself creates internal negative pressure, which draws air in through your nostrils. Envisioning, so this is how an infant learns to breathe. And this, if you think about when that baby puts its clamps onto the breast. The tongue, if you've ever anybody who's ever nursed, it's not like a rubber pacifier little bulb that you stick in your mouth. The breast conforms to the palate. So as the tongue thrusts up against the breast to get the mother's milk out, it opens the palate. And because they breathe while they nurse, they're learning how to pull air in through this suction that they create by clamping the mouth closed. That's why we'll hear a lot of breathe in through the nose, breathe out through the mouth. That's not necessarily required all the time. There's benefit to breathing in through your mouth and out through your nose, which is sneezing. But that's another conversation. So I can see that you're playing with the idea. So just lift the tongue up. Remember that we've got these enslavement things going on, right? Don't speak, shut up, be quiet, don't cry, don't make a lot of noise. Like these are the social enslavement devices that are self-imposed over time. So the idea that our tongue can lift up and spread is challenging for a lot of us, especially women who wear bras, because of what that does to that whole pathway. The bra is an enslavement device. Bra actually means brachial. It's Latin for arms. So when we put a bra on, it does a few things. It holds the clavicle and the scapula in place, so it can't move. We all have grandmothers who have dents in their shoulders from the bra straps, right? When the scapula and the clavicle, so the clavicle meets the right here at the sternum, and the rib cage rides underneath that structure. But now we've got a band going around the rib cage and clipping in the back. And what do they teach you when you go get a bra fitting? You want that nice and tight. So we stabilize the rib cage, the very thing that helps bring breath, air, life into the body. We squeeze it. And then we take the scapula and the clavicle, which assist in the tilting and the spiraling open of the rib cage, and we stabilize those. So that pathway, not only is the pathway compromised, the diaphragm can't expand to its greatest extension on an expression on an inhale. It can't, because the rib cage won't move. And because everything in us is a fractal of something else, a microcosm or a macrocosm, what you see will go out the arms. What you see in women, and this is not just women, I'm just using the bra as an example because men have similar issues. They carry big bags or big gym bags, big computer bags, whatever it is. Seat belts, same idea. But let's talk about women in the bra. When this whole area doesn't move, well, first of all, the heart squoze, just squoze. And the heart, behind the heart is where the lungs are. There's a sac called the hilum. So that's where the gas exchange happens for air to go into the lungs. So that's squoze, it's held tight. When the scapula and the clavicle can't move, now the arm, it can't internally and externally rotate, which is required for the greatest expression of an inhale and the greatest expression of an exhale. And a lot of women will do kind of what you just did, which is pull their elbows out to do it. Because it's restricted here, because the bra holds that. So then we continue out the arm, and what that does is that manifests into the palm. So the palm of your hand is pretty much going to represent what your diaphragm looks like, whether or not you can get a really good inhale or not. And when that can't go to its greatest expression in either direction, then our thumbs can't oppose. And when our thumbs can't oppose, we can't do things like, well, oppose, speak up, open a pickle jar. And so that puts us in that societal box of being too weak. I need a man to open this pickle jar for me. I can't hold this pickaxe. It's not that we're weak, it's that we're wearing enslavement devices.
Interesting. And that doesn't even talk about the underwires in the underwire bras.
Nope.
So instead of all of us burning our bras, okay, that was just fun. What would you recommend? Are there different types of shirts, or because we've seen the bras change?
Yeah.
Moving into more of yoga type material. So is that a good thing? Or, I mean, how do we get out of that? Are we all going
Right.
to run around like the 70s?
Well, the reason that the girls are saggy, though, is because the musculature, the tissue, the structure that holds them isn't being exercised, if you will, right? So I don't really have the right answer for this, because there are people out there with very large breasts who need the support, and it would be completely unfair of me to say just rip it off and let the girls go free. Not to mention that would be very uncomfortable for starters, because you have to build up that tissue, the underlying structure, which is the pectoralis muscles, the pec major and the pec minor, as well as the obliques, the transverse abdominis, the lats, the traps. Like, we're talking about everything, that whole structure. So what I would recommend is doing some really, I like to do it in bed, actually, is to lay in a place that we feel supported and really move our rib cage and our backs, and using our tongue positioning and our navel to feel what it's like to actually roll over using our body, instead of like doing this and then trying to roll over and having back pain from doing it. So I don't know what the right answer is. It mostly, I think, would be to develop a desire to liberate yourself and find the right path. And I'm working on ways to introduce those kind of movements. And I'm sure there are a trillion yoga teachers out there who would have really good input for something like that. However, one thing that I want to make sure I make clear is, being a yoga practitioner for over 20 years now, tight-fitting clothing is not conducive to feeling liberated. It's sort of like a subtle bra for the whole body, because that sends a neurological input to contract. And so you'll see this wave of new yoga clothes where there's women wearing really, flowy, free garments, and that's why it's more liberating.
Okay, I just see naked hippie retreats here where everyone can just get in, just be free and natural and real, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is very interesting. I think it would be a great time now for you to lead us on a little example of what it would, so that we could each, if we feel like it, go into a space where we could feel what this movement is like. Did you want to talk about enslavement devices, additional ones, before we get to that experience?
Well, there are a lot of them. Also, the one for flat abs. I grew up, hold your stomach in. So now we have a self-imposed corset, right? Hold your stomach in, and that's really right. I don't know a woman who doesn't do it, who isn't doing it at this moment. We just don't know how to not let our stomach, we don't know how to let go of our stomachs, because we've been programmed, not just at a young age, at least for me in our age group, at home, hold your stomach in, tuck in your butt, right? Don't stick out your butt. What that does, so then the societal part of that is we need flat abs, right? That's a really challenging one to undo. That's really hard to undo, because for women to feel like we can just, and we are just thinking about taking the bra off is hard for us, because I hope I don't offend anybody when I say this, we're responsible if men can't control themselves because our boobs are out there, right?
Or we don't want to be looked at, right? Right? We don't, maybe we're like embarrassed. I mean,
Yeah,
that
shame.
too. Yeah.
There's shame,
Yeah.
right? Because because we've been taught they need to be covered. And if they're not covered, then we're responsible for somebody having a negative reaction to our beautiful body. Right? I've had people say, oh, well, I take it off when I come home, but I can't do it at the office. And I get it. I totally get it. But how messed up is that? I really, really get it. Having worked in an office and having had my own practice, I know we can't, because they would talk to our breasts, or we would be so, we would feel so exposed because they've been labeled as these sex devices, but they're nurturers. They feed the babies, right?
Do you ever think of, have you ever seen a society that would not care about that, or men who would not care about that? I know I can hear some of the men in our audience who wouldn't tend to look at that, but maybe it's just a genetic, something within the male beingness that sees shape and form and is attracted to that.
And I think that is a wonderful thing, and it should stay that way, right? The woman's body, and the men, we're beautiful. Both of us are. And I think we've fallen into, or we did, and we're coming out of, like you were saying, the men in this audience, they would not have that response. Or maybe they would, and now they're rethinking it. I don't know. But to rethink of it as is a form of beauty, and I would invite you to take it off. And I'm not going to call you out and say I can't, and I'm going to control myself during this process while we take off our enslavement devices, and recognize that this is coming from some low frequency vibration thinking pattern, right?
Yes.
We do it to each other, women, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so as we become more aware of this, what a beautiful thing to just liberate ourselves from. Yes.
And to feel safe, and to have that divine masculine part of our society step up and say, you are safe to do that. You need to be free. Take off the enslavement device. Free the girls.
And so, all right, we know that even the males in our society need a refresher, need an update, an upgrade as well, honoring themselves, honoring the divine within them. Are there enslavement devices for men that men have?
I wouldn't doubt it at all. There's the whole, you're not man enough. You have to prove yourself.
Being macho,
Right.
or not crying. You're right. Yes. Okay.
Yep. They get the same thing. Shut up, don't cry, don't be which is supposed to be an insult for us. It's just really distorted, and they know it, they feel it, because then there's this fear if they don't perform, or if they do and then they don't do it well enough, then that macho status is then taken away from them, right? And so there's this, it's both sides. There's no side to blame. It's just wrong across the board. And it's time, this is where we are now. We're divine masculine and divine feminine are entwining now. We're not pointing fingers at each other anymore. We're both saying, enough. Let's be together. Let's unify. Let's co-create. Right. So For men, I'm sure the audience of divine male could tell us some of their enslavement devices, or maybe this is getting them on a path to think, oh, wow, yeah, for sure. But again, the giant gym bag, right? But shoes. So you asked about other enslavement devices, shoes.
Because we're not with our feet on the earth.
And being biotensegrital, we are electromagnetic, right? So we have to plug into the ground in a very physical way. Just like, you're not going to turn a light on. You're not going to put the plug next to the outlet and be able to turn the light on. It needs to plug in. And the way the foot operates is like a suspension bridge. And that ties, we don't have enough time today, and I'm sure it would bore you to tears if I talk to you about the tendinous, the ligamentous and tendinous attachments that occur on the foot all the way up into the pelvic floor, and then up to the diaphragm, and then up to the whole pathway we just traveled earlier. So the just like the palm is a reflection of the status of your diaphragm, your arch is the reflection of the status of your pelvic floor, which is the root chakra and the sacral chakras, the home. And that's where the water element lives, emotion, right? So shoes, depending upon, arch supports do exactly that. They support your foot. They don't allow you to break out into your own suspension system. So when that arch can't come down and meet with the floor, the ground, then that whole mechanism of breath is compromised, period. And on the way through your pelvic floor and everything in there. Because we're biotensegrital. So if the muscle in your pelvic floor is not expanding and contracting, then everything in there is bundled up and twisted. Everything. And there's a reflection of each one of those in the foot, and a reflexologist can also attest to that. But there's a literal connection to what you see in the foot to its components in the body. So people with plantar fasciitis, that's your pelvic floor.
Interesting. By the time something develops, you could call it an overuse injury, doing something too much, pounding in shoes on your feet over and over and over, where no longer it's in the foot, but it's the result of your pelvic floor being
Or vice
out of
versa.
balance,
Or vice versa.
or vice versa.
Because when you pound on the floor and you're wearing arch supports or you're wearing a heel, the way fascia works is it lines up and it pretty much does what you tell it to do. So if you're pounding on the floor and you're not, and the arch is not able to come down and then soften and harden and soften and harden, it's just being hard. So it lines up and it says, okay, I guess we're just going to stay hard. And that just travels all the way up. And up at the navel, when we're experiencing pain, well, in the pelvic floor, we're squeezing things. We're twisting and squeezing our perineum, our anus, and anything in the front that we can twist up. And then traveling up, we're dialing the navel. The navel is kind of like dialing and twisting in response to that pain. So we can be out on a run in a pair of shoes that we paid a whole lot of money for that's not letting our arch hit the floor. And all of a sudden our hip hurts or our back hurts. Why I have these new shoes? Because you're experiencing that jarring, and your navel, your pain response is heading in that navel, in that whole structural, that whole tensional structure. So on the bottom of every foot is over 2 million nerve receptors. Just like take that in for a minute. There's 2.5 million receptors on the bottom of our feet. And what that means is there's little openings, if you will, to our sensory system. And our sensory system begins it begins in the realm of oneness, and it manifests through our brain. out through 12 cranial nerves that travel out to the farthest reaches, down to the feet. And at the bottom of our feet, just picture like 12.5 million and more little kind of open doors. And if you think about the neural network of the earth, which is mycelium, and if you were to look at a picture of mycelium and a picture of fascia under a microscope, they look the same. So when we go out into the woods or we go to the beach, well, we'll use the woods because there's no mycelium on the beach. There's sand, which is a different input. But we go out onto the ground. Our fascial system it needs to merge with the ground, with Gaia's neural network. That's our fire element. That's our mental body. And if we're not connecting with Gaia, then our mental body is stuck on a loose loop in the brain. Because we don't feel connected. We don't feel a connection. We don't feel like we belong. And so if we go out in the woods and there's a lot of people now doing barefoot walks in the woods. They're lovely. I mean, you gotta be really careful, and you don't have to do a whole trail barefoot, but to really feel your feet on the pine cones and on the forest floor, it's sublime. It's amazing what it does for the body. And then we talk about hammer toes. So the underside of the toes, which I call toe pits, we imagine that the underside of our toes are supposed to be curled. They're not. They're supposed to be touching the ground. And that is a reflection. If you've got, and I've had them, hammer toes or toes that are really curled, that's a reflection of what's going on your neck. That travels all the way up, and that's the microcosm reflection of your neck. So if you wear flip-flops, when you go to walk, to keep the flip-flop on, your toes have to curl under. And if you travel that movement up the body through all of the joints, what happens is you're not in a proper gait pattern when that happens. The toes are crunching, and you can see my head just did that. The head goes into what's called a head forward posture, because the eyes have to stay horizon. So the body's going to try to keep your eyes on the horizon as your toes are trying to keep the shoe on. So if you feel compelled to wear flip-flops, get the kind with the strap around the back. So that is how we ground heaven on earth. Okay, so we're sort of just talking about the body and how we're all kind of messed up from societal pressures and ancestral patterning, and how it manifests in the physical body. But that's how we trip up with our connection to source. Because those ligaments, I see the sensory system and the ligaments as broadband fiber optic fibers. And they're carrying the color lights through our body, and we're plugging into earth or not. And that's how we get our column to because our body is an electromagnetic generator, and the brain is what sort of sends it all out and distributes it. And if our brain's not distributing it all through the body, we can't connect. That electromagnetics there's a disconnect. And when that happens, that's when we have pain, hip pain, foot pain, just name it, all of it. But so we're on an ascension journey or an enlightenment journey, or wherever you are in your awakening process. If you're reaching a plateau, then we want to look at how your body is connecting to the ground, how you're grounding, and how it's being compromised through your words and your holding on to old belief patterns, ones we don't even know about, like these societal ones, and recognizing the ancestral patterns that we don't even know why we're anxious. We don't even know, like, we'll say, oh my God, I just acted like my mother. Like, why we're having these thought patterns that's on the DNA. And as soon as we can unleash that, unravel the navel and plug in, we can start to just stop owning that and releasing it through breath and tissue movement and changing our language, which is something that, there's a lot of work about, yoga practice and all of these different studies on how we can ascend. But one thing that's not really, I don't see really dove into, we don't dive into, I don't see, is our language.
Yes. Yes, the power of our words. And so would you say, even if someone were wearing shoes or flip-flops, that if they were to change their words, that would kind of, would it counterbalance? Are they still doing themselves some good, still wearing shoes, but yet words? I mean, the words would help the energy continue to flow, whereas the shoes, for example, are hindering on a physical level.
Yes, but that physical, so it's both, right? The physical level, and mayhaps if you change your language, it's going to make you desirous to change your shoes, because you'll start to feel the disconnect, right, in the body. But the body does, the body is our vehicle. It's not our identity. This is our God-given vehicle. Our higher self is trying to use this body to anchor heaven here. And if we're not doing our utmost best to get that, to get out of the body and stop trying to own it through conveniences, things that we think are helping us that are not, I would say it's both. And to do it kindly to yourself. I mean, don't go throw all your shoes away, and don't take what I'm saying as an all or nothing. This is a process, and this is stuff that it's taken me over 10 years to understand. So I've transformed in those 10 years. So I'm not suggesting you do all of these things tomorrow and think that it's going to work, because you'll probably end up in a trauma response, right? We want to do this lovingly and patiently and at a rate that feels right for you.
Yes. All right. Well, let's unravel. Let's take a moment to have you help us unravel, really, from the old paradigm or the old beliefs and those patterns. Yes.
Okay, let's go ahead and you can close your eyes if you want, or have them be just sort of close the lids a little, whatever feels more comfortable. And just bring your attention to your heart, the beat. And start to feel the beat. And see if you can feel it beating throughout the body, even if just a little, the reverberation. And allow your belly to soften. Bring your attention to your navel. And when you inhale, experiment with the feeling of the navel. Say it's reaching into the inside of the spine, and that you just want to pull the navel off the front of the spine when you inhale. And just get a feel for that. A couple of breaths. See if you can feel the lower rib cage expand a little bit, or not. Just observations here. Now bring your attention to the space between your eyeballs. And imagine or know that you can let your eyeballs roll away from center. Let them just fall to the side of your skull. Remembering that, and that ligament that I mentioned that sort of is like a sailcloth through the skull. Pull the eyeballs off that center sail. Just let them fall over to your cheekbones. Remembering that your eyeballs are spheres. So allow them to roll if they feel like rolling around. And spin, because rolling and spinning are two different things. And see if you can invite your eyeballs to dial in and up, to look at your pineal gland, to look at your crown, while keeping them away from center. So now you just opened up the physical electrical panel, if you will, for the cranial nerves for your sensory system. And we'll open it up a little bit more. Bring your attention to your tongue. And your tongue, imagine that it extends down through your throat and then it becomes your esophagus. So just know it's one mighty long muscle. And we want to lift the tongue up and spread it against the palate. So you're going to feel the inside of the teeth on the top of the palate. And feel the underside of the tongue. This is a space where it sometimes feels almost choky. And see if we can just balloon that out just a little bit, like a frog. Just to get the sense of that stretchy feeling, like you're stifling a yawn. And then once you have the tongue up on the top of the mouth, sense that when you inhale, bring it into a thrust so it lifts and spreads your teeth away from each other. And you'll feel the upper rib cage open, expand. Don't overthink this. Let the eyeballs stay the outer reaches of the skull, over by the cheekbones, over by the ears. Looking up at your crown. And then start to feel that line from the tongue down the throat, past the heart, that you can feel beating, all the way down to the navel. And feel yourself lifting your tongue, opening your throat, and pulling down with the navel at the same time, like you're stretching a sheet over a clothesline. And feel the entire rib cage expand in the mid back, where if you're a woman, you would feel the bra strap, the band of the bra. Take some deep breaths in, and just let the air fall out, whether it's through your nose or your mouth, whatever. And you can take it one step further. When you inhale, expand the rings of your nostrils. And you might find that you can pull the ribs out even more. Feel that navel pull down and out as the stomach, the belly moves forward and draws the spine down as the tongue lifts up. Couple of more breaths. Notice too if your pelvic floor started gripping to assist. These are just things to note. Don't try to make too many changes at once. Just things to notice. Did your butt cheeks squeeze? Did your inner thighs squeeze? Did your toes clench? Just take a note of it. Don't try to change it yet. And then when you're ready, you can just let your eyes roll back to where they were. And disengage the tongue. Let your eyes roll open. And there we are.
Such a beautiful, subtle shift, a release. Beautiful.
Good.
Feeling our heartbeat, feeling just how it's all connected. That was really magnificent. And that was just a short little experience. And what I love about it is this is incredible work. It's almost like this is inner Feldenkrais or inner shifting, inner unraveling, and or inner yoga.
I call it inner space journeying.
Inner space journeying. And the power, I mean, the benefits of that. When you work with so many people, I mean, we're going to talk about classes that you offer for people to go really deep in this and at length. What are some of the benefits or the changes that you see in their lives?
The sense of self-liberation. Because when I worked hands-on before COVID-19, before the pandemic, I got to a point where I didn't want to have people come and have me heal them, because that's not what this is all about. This is about self-liberation. And the best way to do that is to get inside and feel and find. And so what I see happening with people is this sense of freedom that they didn't even know they had the keys to. And an understanding that, it's all there. So that this liberation from mental constructs that were self-imposed, and then because they were self-imposed, brought on a sense of guilt or shame or confusion. Why is my life like this? Why can't I get out of these patterns? And then to feel like you're in control of all of it, and simultaneously not in control. And the powers that do take control have your best interest in mind. So the sense of surrendering, that learning to surrender, and it's an ongoing process. I'm still doing it, I'm still doing it myself, and will be till the day I pass over. And the more I learn, the more I'll share. So the sense of receiving this information to free yourself, to liberate yourself. And everybody's liberation is totally different. It's very unique. That's why prescribed movement stuff doesn't work. It won't work. I mean, it'll work to a degree, but then beyond that, you have to get in and do the mud work yourself.
Let's talk about the classes that you offer, because this is where we can clean up the mud. And you've got two beautiful offerings.
Yep. So the two that we're talking about, on the first day, calling it, so we talked, well, there are steps to take. It's not just the inner space movement, right? You set up your life and your day. So in the first session, we will do what I call create a high frequency chamber. So learn how to create an atmosphere around you that is full of qualifying thoughts and language. And then let's see, what else do we do? Oh, and then in that session, that first session, we talk about creating and sowing a word garden. So I call I call something a word, this thing I have called a word garden, where you observe the words that you are using in your everyday language, and you begin to discern which ones bring you into a lower frequency, a lower vibration, which ones that you want to weed out of your garden. And just like any kind of habit, you can't just stop doing something. It has to be replaced with something. So you can't remove a word and then not have something to replace it with, because if you find yourself in a situation where you're throwing down a bunch of 4-letter words, you need to have replacements for them. Otherwise, you'll just go right back into using your old. So we'll develop what's called a word garden. And that's a really fun process, because I have a banishment page where we banish some words. It's pretty cool. And then, much like what we just did, unleashing your tongue and breathing deep, another inner space guided journey. So we would go a little bit deeper into what we were just doing, with the benefit of having created a high frequency chamber, begin the process of learning our vernacular, which words work. And I offer qualifying language that is literal language from the 12 heavenly spheres. So these are words that we know work. And highly recommend to sow those heirloom seeds into your word garden. So that's day 1. And then day 2 is surrendering the slave mind. So that is, we go into a session where we call in the elementals, and from each portal or each vortex, core of purity of each of the elemental bodies, we banish our slave mind. We banish the carnal mind. And we awaken our I am presence, which came into all of us. I think that was late 2019, early 2020. I'm sorry, late 2020, early 21, where I am came in, but can't come out until we say, please come out. Free will and all. So we go in and we begin the process, which again is not a one and done, because that slave mind is sneaky. And so that's what the high frequency chamber is helpful with. So we keep returning and banishing the slave mind and reminding ourselves that our I am presence is in the core of purity of each one of our elementals. So that's in day 2, as well as really playing more deeply with the navel, which I call the nexus in the solar plexus, to ring your belly button, and really feeling the connections of the navel as it travels into the body. So that's the 2-day event.
That is a beautiful way that we can treat ourselves to this higher consciousness embodiment, and unraveling ourselves from those thought patterns, literally changing our DNA the minute we begin to do this. I do love that. Deep relaxation and truly bringing heaven on earth. All right. So you also have another option. There's another series of courses that folks can join you with as well.
Yes, but wait, there's more, right? So then we have a series that I'm calling the Super Bloom into Embodiment. And this 3-part series, the first day is called Unraveling the Human Heart. So the human heart is actually a vortex. It's not a solid organ, it's a tube. And in this series, we work on the movements of we talk about the movement. I go in depth about the shape of the heart and the bra and the arms, and show you the sketches that I've done and how it relates to the movement of the body. And then the class of it is to bring in is to actually do that movement and feel it. So that's unraveling a willing heart, because again, free will is important here. We have to invite all of this in. And so we will our heart to unravel, we will our heart to unroll, we will our heart to be the reflection, our unique reflection of heaven on earth, our unique projection. So that's day 1. Day 2 is breathing your feet to the ground. So reversing dystopia within the body. So dystopia means disorganization. So if you think about what we were talking about, biotensegrity is all of the organs being where they're supposed to be, so we can ground and be electromagnetic currents for to anchor the new earth. Dystopia is a distortion. The organs are out of place. And that is reflected in, dysfunctional breathing patterns, in what we were already talking about, all of the things we talked about today, that gnarls up the organs in the tissue, that wax in the fabric. So in the second session, breathing your feet to the ground, I go further into what we were talking about today with the arch and the toes, with the cranial nerve, the toes with the neck and the cranial nerves. And, there's some really, really fascinating stuff with how each joint of the foot is related to various joints in the body. For example, the bone on the outside of the foot, on the outside of the arch, this bone here called the cuboid bone, the relationship of this bone to the calcaneus, this is the heel bone, and this cuboid bone, it connects to your fourth and fifth toes. This joint here, the relationship is a reflection of the SI joint, the sacrum and the pelvis. So if you've got an SI joint problem or L4-5 problem, if you have it, that's going to be reflected in your outer arch of your foot, and whether this cuboid and your calcaneus have motion together. So we get into stuff like that. So this is kind of a heavy anatomy, not too heavy anatomy, because I do explain it all, but I bring out stuff for you to see. So that's day 2. And we'll talk about how to unkink your toes and different things that you can do to open the fascia on the feet and get your feet to ground, and also to recognize the other parts of your body that are going to be reflected, or how they're reflected. And then when we talk about the third class, this is the big one. And this third class is the reason that I've been offline for almost a year now, because I received this information and I questioned it. I was like, no, this can't be true. And I kept getting, yes, it is. And I questioned it, and it just kept presenting and showing, and I can see it. And this is really the first time I'm going to be saying this on a forum instead of to a couple of friends who probably think I've gone off my rocker, which is completing the helix in terms of that dystopian structure in the body. At the fall of humanity, it happened, there was a density, a compression that happened. And this is why the earth is off polarity. That reflected in our body. So the fall of humanity reflected physically in our body. And what that did was that ligament that I was talking about, the umbilical ligament, there's a spin-off of it, the round ligament, that tore, it frayed to another part of our body, which is the appendix. And if you look at an appendix, and then I go into definitions. So the appendix, the Latin word for what it's really called is a vermiform, and a vermiform is a worm that rises up. And so if you look at the appendix in anatomy books, they're found in all different places, because they're searching for what is called where to invaginate. We're talking about the masculine, the feminine entwining as a whole. So in the body, when fascia moves, it's called invaginating. So the appendix and the round ligament were broken during the fall of humanity. And the appendix, again, this is what I've been shown. There's nobody out there that I think is going to tell you this. So please take what I say with a grain of salt, but I'm experiencing it. When the appendix can invaginate back to the round ligament, the light codes can be released. So when those light codes came down last year, a lot of them were stored in the appendix. And so in this class, we basically go into using the language, the vernacular, the qualifying language, and you start to learn the power of your voice once you free it, to call to call the appendix to the round ligament to connect, to re-yoke. That's the completion of the circle in the body that was tethered during the fall.
Okay, that is really great. This inner wisdom, this is inner wisdom that you know. All right, the round ligament, did you say comes from the umbilical cord?
The umbilical ligament, when it's cut, it turns into, transmutes into what's called an umbilical ligament. And that umbilical ligament then, it transforms into other ligaments. And one of them is called the round ligament. That ligament heads up in toward the spleen, which is where the blood, we could go into this for a long time because that's where the blood is stored, right? So we talk about Christed blood. We talk about our bloodline being siphoned from various other sources. We could go down a whole bunch of rabbit holes with this. So the round ligament and the appendix need to invaginate. They need to basically do what we see the masculine and the feminine when they merge. So the challenge with that is, in that same area is a nerve in our body. So running along, so when we today we mostly went up, but when we go down with that ligament, it travels down between the pubic bones, here between the pubic bones. And it also branches. Okay. Where it runs along the front of the spine is a nerve. Well, it actually comes down and goes into the pelvis. It's a nerve that is the only nerve that delivers the orgasm. And the name of the nerve is called the pudendal nerve. And pudendal, and here's an enslavement code. Pudendal is Latin for to be ashamed of. So when we feel shame, that nerve rings a bell in a not a good way, more like it rings an alarm. So that's in the same neighborhood of where we're talking about this invagination needing to happen. So the idea and the thought and the sensory experience that needs to be in play, how it brings us to places where societally we have to face it now. We're here. Like, the majority of society right now has pelvic floor dysfunction. So there's sexual dysfunction all over the place because of the shame that's involved with just the thought of it, and coping mechanisms, the shame involved with the coping mechanisms. And then, then there's all of the other negative behavior that presents. So our minds won't take us there all the time. And we see the ad. I don't watch TV at all, but I used to see the ads for all of the dysfunctional issues going on. And, I know women have the same challenge. So before that can happen, that heal it, so we can know about it, and I can talk to people about what the body positions to get the appendix to meet the round ligament. But what also needs to happen on your own time is the opening up to the idea of being sensual without it being sexual. And that is all sacral and root. It's all sacral chakra and root chakra. And it goes back to the sacrum and the root chakra, the pelvic floor.
Yeah. And you realize that, medical doctors in the mainstream medicine don't know really what the appendix does. And here's that connection. And it happened from our fall of humanity. So we are reconnecting this. And you said it's indicative of the male and female,
right,
within ourselves.
Yes. And that's what we're doing. We're entwining masculine and feminine. Not only, before we can do it out there, we have to do it in here.
Unity within ourselves.
Hieros gamos. And if you think about the hip problems, right? people have either a right hip or a left hip, and you say, oh, that's your masculine side, that's your feminine. And that's true. That's where that energy flows. And I don't really know too much about that, but I do know that that's implied. But if we think about the hips, of course, because we're disconnected there, there's a disconnect. And until we can connect that, until we can entwine with our own divine masculine, our own divine feminine, be balanced, then we can find the partnership that we've been searching for.
Incredible. Carly Vernon, thank you. We are very excited about you sharing this wisdom and these experiences for everyone to truly unravel and embody higher consciousness here in the physical vehicle. It is groundbreaking. We do not see this out in the world, and that's exciting to us. And so, for those who are really ready to do this deep inner work, this magical inner work, this life-changing inner work, we invite you to Carly's classes. The details for this is right here on this webpage, and you can sign up and join in all of the beautiful experiences. And the intuition that comes from that, would you like to add anything about how we really bring that forward or listen to that intuition like you have?
Never doubt it. Never doubt it. And for some of us, it comes through differently. Some of us see, some of us hear. My intention is to bring clairsentience, which is all of them, clairsentience, all of your sensory system, to bring it online. And, you know, we really just touched base on what I am shown on a regular basis. And this didn't just come and flow in for me. I had to work for this. And my intention is to not have you have to work as hard as I did to get this information. And so the one way to do that is to do, there are two things I can recommend that really will help in a lot. And I think that they sound too simple that we end up not doing them. The first one is to create that tube of light in that high frequency chamber, which I invite people to learn how to do. And we can talk about my offering that as an extra, right? I can just record it and offer that. The important thing with doing anything like that, a high frequency chamber, is that is an invocation, and that has to do with free will. So you could listen to a recording of it till the cows come home, and you'll get benefits from it. However, you have to invoke it. To invoke means to call with your voice. And then if we go back to the whole bra thing and the whole enslavement devices, our voice has been, stuffed down, twisted up. So we're not used to using our voice because we're told to be quiet, right? So the important part of any of this is to get used to using your voice and calling and asking for what you want, what you desire, with qualifying language. So that's one thing. So that's the beginning of your day. So you start your day and you create this frequency chamber, high frequency chamber. It's the heavenly atmospheres around you. You're breathing them in and you're feeding it with your qualifying language. The second thing is, at the end of the day, to put yourself in what I call a temple of sleep. And I offer that actually free to the public. Every Sunday night, I do it. And I do it on Telegram. And it's recorded, so you can listen. You don't have to be there live on Sunday. You can tap in, you can listen to it. And every now and again, I'll post a PDF so you can learn how to read it. But ideally, you just want to use your own voice to do it. And what happens in the temple of sleep is you are creating, again, that high frequency chamber around your sleeping environment, around your home. And the key here is in the temple. I think anybody who grew up Christian knows, now I lay me down to sleep. We know that. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. So I grew up Christian, but I gave that up a while ago for various reasons. but I am highly spiritual, and I do talk to Jesus, and I do talk to Archangel Michael. And what I know for sure now is we have to, at the end of our day, because those disqualifying thoughts, that's karmic junk. It's a loosh. It's called loosh. And even no matter how much we are qualifying, we still got the loosh going on. It's on a loop, a loosh loop, I call it, a loosh leash loop. And so what we have to do is we have to ask for forgiveness for all of the junk that we've processed during the day, known and unknown to us. So to ask for forgiveness, and so that at the end of the day, because they're up there taking notes, like there's a clipboard that at the end of our day, they write our whole, like that's an Akashic Records, it's the Akashic Records. So what we want to do is say, wait, before you write that down, let's erase all that. And now I want you to just write down the immaculate concept that I am, because look, I'm working hard. So can you please just like forget that and just write down the good stuff? And they're like, yeah, we can do it. But we have to ask. And so that's what, and then there's other things we do in the sleeping temple. We can ask for upgrades. We can ask to go to different retreats with different masters, whatever. I mean, you could, the sky's the limit. But the important part is to create that impenetrable chamber, so dark manipulative energy can't get in, and also to wipe your slate and mark you with a gold star at the end of the day.
Really great, Carly. Thank you so much. I know many are really excited to join you in these classes and learn as much as you know and as much as you are sharing. It's quite beautiful. Yes. And this is perfect for what type of person?
This is perfect for the person who is ready to upgrade, who is tired of feeling like a victim, who no longer wants to feel like that, who wants to gain control, who is especially good for somebody who has a heavy interest in anatomy. But it's for anybody who's ready to step into the driver's seat and really move, really get in on it.
All right. Thank you so much for this beautiful episode today, and for sharing your brilliant wisdom, and for creating this exquisite modality. It really is very fine and leading edge. So thank you, Carly.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Really, thank you so much.